Single dad let a runaway girl sleep in his diner, then her mother arrived with police. It was 20 minutes past midnight when the bell above the diner door chimed, and Marcus didn't even look up at first. He was wiping down the last of the countertops, exhausted in the way only a man carrying the world alone could be, the kind of tired that lives in your bones and never fully leaves. His diner, Ray's Red Booth, had been his entire life for 6 years, ever since his wife passed and left him with a 12-year-old son, a mountain of debt, and the stubborn belief that hard work and hot coffee could fix almost anything. The late-night crowd had thinned hours ago. He figured it was just the wind nudging the door. But then he heard it, a small, sharp sound, almost like a hiccup swallowed too quickly. He looked up, and standing just inside the doorway, soaking wet from the October rain and clutching a backpack like it was the only solid thing left in her world, was a girl who couldn't have been more than 13 years old. She wasn't crying. That was the first thing Marcus noticed. Her jaw was set, her eyes scanning the room with the cautious look of someone who had learned too early that safety was never guaranteed. Her sneakers left small puddles on the tile. She didn't ask for anything. She just stood there, braced, like she was already expecting to be told to leave. Marcus had a rule about after-hours guests, he didn't have them. The diner closed at 11, and that was that. He had his son sleeping in the back apartment, a lease to protect, and a reputation in the neighborhood that he'd spent years building. Every sensible part of him said to gently send her on her way, maybe call someone. But there was something in her eyes, not fear exactly, but a kind of hollow exhaustion, that stopped him cold. It reminded him of the look he used to see in his own mirror during the worst months after losing his wife. The look of someone who had simply run out of places to fall. He put down his rag, walked to the nearest booth, and slid a menu across the table without a word. "Kitchen's mostly closed," he said quietly, "but I've got soup on the stove and pie under the glass. You sit. You eat. We'll figure out the rest. If you believe in kindness and second chances, if you think the world needs more people like Marcus, please take a moment right now to like this video, drop a comment below, share it with someone who needs to hear this story, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Every person who joins this community makes the ripple of compassion go a little further." Her name, she eventually offered between slow spoonfuls of tomato soup, was Lily. She didn't offer a last name, and Marcus didn't push. He had learned through years of feeding strangers that people tell you what they're ready to tell you, and the rest comes with time and warmth. What she did share, in fragments and half-sentences, was enough to sketch the outline of a storm. A home that had become a battlefield. A mother whose love had curdled somewhere into something rigid and suffocating. A stepfather whose presence made the walls feel like they were closing in. And a night, just hours ago, when Lily had finally decided that anywhere else in the world had to be safer than the place she was supposed to call home. Marcus listened without interrupting. He refilled her water twice and cut her a second slice of apple pie without asking. And when she finally went quiet, staring down at the table with those hollowed-out eyes, he didn't tell her she was wrong to leave or right to leave. He just told her the truth, that she didn't have to figure out tonight what the rest of her life looked like. Tonight, she just had to be warm and full and safe. His son's old sleeping bag was in the back storage room. There was a cot they used during inventory nights. Nobody would bother her until morning, and in the morning, they would think together about next steps. It was the kind of decision that couldn't be made with logic. It was made with the part of a person that remembers what it felt like to be desperate and alone, and refuses to look away from that in someone else. He didn't sleep much that night. He sat at the counter with lukewarm coffee, listening to the rain and turning the situation over in his mind. He knew he was walking a fine line. A grown man, alone in a diner, letting a young girl sleep in the back. The world didn't always leave room for goodness to just be goodness. But he also knew that putting her back out into that rain, or leaving her to whatever the night had in store on those streets, wasn't something he could live with. He wrote down everything, the time she arrived, what she said, every detail, because he understood instinctively that documentation was the armor of the innocent. Dawn came slowly. His son, Daniel, found Lily in the back before Marcus could explain, and in the unguarded, uncomplicated way of children, simply asked if she wanted pancakes. She laughed for the first time, a small, startled sound, like she'd forgotten she knew how, and said yes. For 45 minutes, the diner felt almost like a different kind of story. Flour on the counter. Maple syrup. The radio on low. 3 people who barely knew each other moving around a kitchen like it was the most natural thing in the world. And then the door opened. She came in like a force of weather, blonde hair, red power suit, eyes burning with a terror that had sharpened itself into fury during the long night of searching. Behind her were 2 police officers, and behind them, the fractured glass of the door that had swung too hard on its hinges. She pointed at Marcus before the door had even closed behind her, her voice cracking across the diner like a whip, accusing, raw, absolutely certain of his guilt. Marcus didn't move. He didn't raise his voice. He simply stepped slightly in front of Lily, not to hide her, but to give her a moment, a single breath of time to find her footing before the storm hit. Then he turned to the officers, not the mother, and said quietly that he had documentation of everything, that the girl had come to him in distress in the middle of the night, and that he had done what any decent human being would do. He slid his handwritten notes across the counter. What happened in the next hour was messy and painful and real. There were tears, Lily's and eventually, her mother's too. There was a conversation that the police gently facilitated, one that peeled back the surface of the conflict and found something more complicated than a villain and a victim. A mother who had been drowning in her own fear and control and hadn't known how to stop. A daughter who had needed to be heard more than she had needed anything else. There was no clean resolution, no easy bow tied around the morning. But there was a crack of light, the kind that only appears after something breaks open. The officers, after reviewing Marcus's notes and speaking with Lily alone, told him quietly that he'd done right. That in a different set of hands, that night could have ended very differently for a 13-year-old girl alone in the rain. If this story moved something in you, if it reminded you that ordinary people doing ordinary acts of courage can change everything, please like this video, share it with someone you love, and leave a comment below telling us, what would you have done if you were Marcus? Your words matter more than you know. Marcus never made the news. No one wrote a feature about the single dad who kept a runaway warm and safe through one cold October night. He went back to wiping counters and making coffee and raising his son in the cramped apartment behind the kitchen. But Lily came back, 3 weeks later, with her mother. They sat in the corner booth, the same one where Lily had first eaten soup with shaking hands, and they ordered 2 slices of apple pie. Her mother thanked him in a voice that was small and sincere and clearly unaccustomed to admitting it had been wrong. Comment the word warmth below if you believe one act of kindness can change the entire direction of someone's life. Marcus just refilled their coffee and told them it was good to see them both. Because some people don't need to be heroes. They just need to keep the light on and the door open, and trust that the people who need it most will find their way in from the rain.